Welcome back, Best of Trekkers! Today we've got mostly two-parters to warp into. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Putting out a help wanted at 241 and 240, slave labor. Or Workforce Parts 1 and 2. As we find familiar faces from Voyager, we're dropped into our characters in unfamiliar roles in a new setting. And I'd like to hand it to the CGI team for this episode, as this late 90s, early 2000s cityscape looks better than basically anything Enterprise would do in non-space CGI a few years later. Turns out Voyager ran into a radiation trap that forced the crew to abandon ship, and they were taken by bounty hunters and had their memories altered to think they came to this planet with a labor shortage looking for work. Though it gives the Doctor a chance to live out his dream of firing the photonic cannon as the red-shirted ECH. Chakotay, Neelix, and Kim also join them from a separate mission in the Delta Flyer that somehow Chakotay managed to bring back in one piece. After a bunch of cloak and dagger maneuvers and Chakotay going to the planet in disguise seeking answers, they managed to get some non-compromised authorities involved to stop this forced labor syndicate. Beyond the excellent CGI, this episode gives us a chance to look at Voyager's characters in a different light. We see Paris and Torres are possibly meant to be together, despite not remembering who the other was. It gives the captain her most real romantic relationship in 7 years, even though the circumstances reveal it to be a fake. Meanwhile, Harry, Kim, and the Doctor, as the only crew of Voyager, get to show off their hidden talents. Getting caught up in the future's war at 239, temporal shenanigans, or cold front. As Enterprise boldly explores long roads, it comes across a protostar approaching an event where it releases a visually pleasing burst of energy, known to one group as the Great Plume of Agasauria. The crews get some cultural exchange, and in the mix take on an unexpected guest in disguise. Their old foil Silic, whose Shadow Man from the future has tasked him with actually helping Enterprise avoid destruction, so he can steal technology from the future temporal agent serving on Enterprise, Crewman Daniels. I know there's a segment of the Trek fandom that's not super into this 4-season story arc, but I gotta say, I am here for it 100%. It fleshes out the Federation's pre-burn time police and gives the crew of Enterprise some interesting side quests over most of the show's run. The moral of the story: if someone brings you eggs just the way you like them, you should probably keep them around. Finding its place in the galaxy at 238, or die trying. After an initial rough go of coming to the future, Discovery is finally reunited with Starfleet. For a much diminished organization, their new headquarters that's not easily detectable is very impressive. Along with our introduction to nearly 1,000 years worth of Starship advancements, and I'm pretty sure this was the point in the franchise I stopped paying attention to ship classes. Because from this point forward, it feels like we're introduced to a new class of Federation ship every other episode through all the new shows. It does have some amazing CGI work overall, though. CNC Admiral Charles Vance has a lot of reservations, however, about adding Discovery and particularly its crew to the fleet. For Starfleet, debriefings are at worst frustrating and at best hilarious. Picking up on a chance to help prove their worth in an ongoing medical crisis, Burnham takes Discovery with some 22nd century Federation observers to get a possible means to a cure from a Federation seed vault located halfway across the quadrant. What they find there is the aftermath of a tragedy, where the family of the current keeper of the vault were killed, and he was turned into some kind of energy-based life in a transporter accident. After acknowledging his pain and Burnham making her first connections with cosmic music associated with the burn, they return from an otherwise successful mission while saying goodbye to one of my favorite characters, Nan. There is so much going on in this episode, and truly something to like for everybody. My personal favorite bits are the interactions between Georgiou and Kovich. Protecting itself at 236 and 37, Minutemen Militia, or the Maquis. This episode kicks off a franchise arc of the disillusioned members of the former Federation colonies that have by treaty found themselves on the wrong side of the Cardassian border. It also kicks off the long-running joke about Captain Baudet, as a Cardassian freighter is destroyed in this tit-for-tat gang war in the demilitarized zone, spilling over into neighboring systems. This leads Dukat to be a good friend and shows Sisko the situation on the ground that he was previously unaware of. And his old friend has been shifting his sympathies to the Maquis and provides him his first former officer foil tropes in the run of the show. Meanwhile, the Cardassian Union tries to pin an arms smuggling scheme on Dukat, and he and Sisko work to stop a Maquis plot and clear his good name. For me, this episode marks Sisko's first great speech about how Earth is the problem and it's easy to overlook the suffering of others in a place where life is good. In general, this is the set of episodes where DS9 feels like it hits its stride, just ahead of the Dominion arc. Making a crash landing at 2:35, Objects in Mirror, or That Hope Is For You, Part 1. This is the one exception in this list to two-parters being ranked together, because it's not really a two-parter, but a production naming gimmick bookending Disco's third season. Michael Burnham is dropped into the 32nd century on a collision course with Book's ship, forcing both of them to crash on a nearby planet and then tussle a bit before declaring an uneasy truce. That Book breaks as soon as they reach a nearby trading hub. He gets her arrested and she gets high AF from a truth serum they use on her, and eventually hooks back up with Booker and they shoot their way out, as we learn the virtues of the personal transporter as the battle continues across landscapes, culminating in trying to reclaim an endangered animal, one of which we'll see later kill Osiris' nephew, and Book's showing off his druid powers to turn the creature on their pursuers. The episode is bookended by a guy with an awesome bird alarm clock that gets up every day and plays Starfleet officer aboard a former Federation station. When Burnham comes along, she inducts him as a non-commissioned part of Starfleet and enlists his long-term aid in figuring out when and where Discovery might join her in the future. When you put aside questions like, why did she have to get rid of the Red Angel suit? This episode is the first for me where Michael became a real character that literally stands on her own, and the introduction of Grudge cements this one's place in these rankings. Wrapping up our block and Season 1 of Picard at 2:33 and 2:34, Departures, or Et in Arcadia Ego Parts 1 and 2. These two episodes have some high highs and some low lows, but overall I'd consider them quite good episodes of Trek. As La Sirena exits a transwarp corridor, they find they've been followed by the Romulan Narek, and completely out of nowhere, the artifact Borg Cube shows up, with Queen 7 at the helm. All ships concerned are pulled down to the planet's surface by Flowers, where Picard's terminal condition reveals itself to the rest of the cast. They first reunite with 7 and Elnor before going to meet another soon-creating androids. Like they do. Turns out synthetic life can mind meld now, which is in no way terrifying, and the synths learn of the AI overlords that lurk just out of reach, and decide a synth-only galaxy might be their best option for long-term survival. Thankfully, Picard is able to figure out holographic controls and use the Jurati maneuver to hold off a couple hundred copy-and-paste Romulan ships, long enough for a copy-and-paste fleet of hundreds of Starfleet ships to show up, drive the Romulans off, and convince the androids to shut down their portal into the synth dimension. It's a win-win for everyone. Except Picard, whose condition finally catches up to him and dies in the arms of those who care about him. This could, and maybe should, have been the final nail in the coffin of one of Star Trek's greatest characters, in this moment that's basically impossible to not cry over. And then Picard begins a new chapter as a synthetic that has no enhanced abilities and will still die in a few years anyway. But not before, in death, he meets a remnant of Data Soong and friends have kept alive. And in one of the most controversial decisions Trek has ever made, they force us to watch Data die a second time. Which, at face value, I hate. but it always provokes a strong emotional response, and that's all you can truly ask from a piece of media, even if you don't agree with the production decisions that got us to this point. Narek's fate is never known, though 7 of 9 gets an awesome action sequence potentially killing his sister Nerissa. There is so much going on in this episode, it's impossible to summarize everything. But despite its many flaws, I believe it's a very touching and enjoyable set of episodes in the franchise.
Ah, computer! That program is available.
Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major.
Last time on Star Trek Voyager.
Thanks, Major.
Warning, main computer is failing. Command codes transferred.
Thanks, Major.
An alien vessel has locked onto Voyager with a tractor beam.
Thanks, Major.
Warp engines are offline.
Thanks, Major.
And now for the conclusion.
It's not wise to play with matches.